Let me tell you something right up front. This is not a story about hate. I know that's what you're expecting. I know the title almost promises it. A woman betrayed, 45 years of lies, a husband with a secret life. You'd be entitled to the hate. I'd understand it if I were you. But what I'm bringing you today is something harder to carry and harder to accept. I'm bringing you the truth. And the truth, as always, is stranger and more complicated than hate. My name is Diana Merritt. I'm 70 years old. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, in a house in the Wagoner Terrace neighborhood that my mother kept with the precise care of a woman who didn't have much, but kept everything in its place. My father worked at the Charleston Navy Yard. My mother took in alterations for the neighbors. I was an only child. I learned early that things aren't asked for. They're earned, they're tended, and they're not wasted. At 22 years old, I married Robert Merritt. He was handsome in that quiet way that gets inside you slowly, like the smell of coffee in the morning. You don't notice it until it's gone. An accountant, precise, punctual, reliable, hands always clean, shoes always shined. My mother said, "Diana, this man is going to take good care of you." She believed it until the last day of her life. I believed it too, for 45 years. Let me tell you who I was before I tell you who he was, because this story isn't only about Robert. It's about me, too, about the woman I had chosen to be, or maybe the woman I had allowed other people to choose for me. I was a good wife. I say that without irony, without bitterness. I kept the house. I cooked every day. Not simple food, real food. A pot roast on Sundays, homemade biscuits on Saturday mornings, a pie for whatever holiday was coming. I had worked as an office administrator for 11 years before our daughter Claire was born, and then I left because Robert said it made more sense, that his salary was enough, that a child needed her mother at home. I didn't argue. It wasn't that I was afraid of him. Robert never raised his voice. He wasn't that type. In some ways, that was worse. He was the type who convinced you with reason, with that quiet, patient tone, until you understood that everything had already been decided, and the conversation was just a formality. I raised Claire. I went with Robert to his work dinners and smiled at the right moments, and stayed quiet at the right moments, and came home knowing I had done my part well. I handled the household accounts that he left to me with the careful attention my mother had taught me. Every expense noted, every saving put aside. Over the years, I had tucked away my own savings. Not a great deal, but something, what I could shave off the grocery budget, what was left in my small personal account. Robert didn't pay attention to it, or at least I thought he didn't. That was my life, and I was certain it was his, too. Robert died on a Tuesday in November. Heart attack, sudden, at his office. He was 72 years old. The doctor said he hadn't suffered. They always say that. I'm not sure if it's kindness or just habit, but I accepted it because I needed something to hold on to. There were a lot of people at the funeral. Robert had many connections, colleagues, clients, old friends from high school. There were faces I didn't recognize, but that always happens at funerals, and you don't think much of it. I stood next to the casket, with Claire holding my hand. I watched people come through the line, shaking hands, saying the things people say. I was strangely calm. I don't call it shock now. I call it the emotional illiteracy of someone who was never taught to feel what she actually felt. 3 days after the funeral, while going through Robert's things, I found the phone. Not his regular phone. This was another phone, a small, old, basic model, hidden underneath a stack of dress shirts in the back of the bottom drawer. I picked it up. It was off. I charged it. When it came on, it had a passcode. I tried our wedding anniversary. Wrong. I tried Claire's birthday. Wrong. I tried my birthday. It opened. It took me nearly an hour to understand why that hurt more than anything else. Inside, there were messages. Hundreds. Years of messages. And photographs. and voice memos. I sat down on the edge of the bed where I had slept for 45 years, and I started to read. I won't tell you everything, not to spare myself. I'm 70 years old. I'm past the point of being embarrassed by my own story. I won't tell you everything because not everything matters. What matters is enough. There was a woman. Her name was Renee, about 10 years younger than me. She lived in Columbia, about 2 hours up the highway. They had met roughly 18 years before. 18 years. Claire was already 32 when it started. Our silver anniversary had already come and gone. We were already what people call a solid couple, established, with their history and their weight behind them. But that wasn't what broke me. The infidelity itself, the raw fact of it, I had absorbed even while still reading, with that cold calm that comes when your body decides it cannot afford to collapse right now. What broke me were the voice memos. Robert sent her voice messages, long ones. He would describe his day, describe the dinners we attended together, but in a version where I was the background, the furniture, the wallpaper. And in some recordings he talked about me. He called me the mouse. My little mouse, he would say, in that quiet voice I knew. She doesn't see a thing. She still believes it. She'll never figure it out. He laughed, with the same voice I had heard laugh for 45 years, the voice I had heard laugh with me, with Claire, with friends on summer evenings on the back porch. He was laughing at me. I sat on the edge of that bed for I don't know how long. My cat, his name is Stout, was on the floor, watching me with that impassive gravity that cats have, the ones who always know more than they let on. I thought about my mother, about how much she had loved Robert, how proud she was of him, right up until the end, how she defended him even when there was nothing to defend. I thought about my savings, and here I have to stop for a moment, because this is the part you're not expecting. The next morning I went to the bank, not to withdraw money, to check. Our joint account was in order. There was enough to carry me through the next few months while I sorted out the estate. But my account, my personal account, the one I had carefully kept separate, the one where I had set aside my own savings over the years, the balance was a third of what it should have been. I asked for 10 years of statements. Robert had had a power of attorney on the account. I had given it to him years earlier for convenience. Over 10 years he had made withdrawals, small amounts, spread out, totaling just under $60,000. $60,000. My money. The money I had put aside penny by penny, years of keeping the grocery budget tight, years of not this year and that can wait. I sat in the bank chair and looked at the teller. A young man, couldn't have been more than 28, ties slightly crooked, and he was looking back at me with the face of someone who doesn't know whether to call a manager or wait for the elderly lady to stop staring at the paper. I said, "Thank you. I just need a moment." He offered water. "No. Please bring me the paperwork to revoke all existing powers of attorney on this account." While I waited for the forms, I did something strange. Not from happiness. Not from madness. I smiled because in that instant I understood something I should have understood years earlier. I was still here. He wasn't. He had died with all his secrets and all his quiet laughter. And I was sitting in a bank in Charleston at 70 years old with $60,000 less, but with air in my lungs and still everything ahead. I had a choice to make. Claire doesn't know the whole story yet. She knows Robert had another woman. I told her it was right that she knew. She cried. She said things about her father I won't repeat. Then she steadied herself, the way strong people do. But I haven't told her about the money yet. I needed to decide what I was going to do first. When people found out, my friend Barbara, my cousin Frank, who practices family law, they said, "Diana, you need to act. You need to consult an attorney. Protect your rights." Frank explained the options. The estate could be contested, the unauthorized withdrawals. I stopped him. Frank, Robert is dead. I know that, but your rights. I know my rights, and I'll use them when the time is right. But tell me one thing. If I win, what changes? I recover the money, maybe, partially, after years of fighting, and I spend those years in a battle with a dead man, giving him more of my time, letting him one more time decide how I use my energy. Silence. Or I recover what I can through the normal estate process and use my energy for something else. I am not saying I forgave Robert. I have not forgiven Robert. Maybe I never will. Maybe I will. I don't know yet, and I'm not worried about knowing right now. But I decided he would not have any more of my time. Not when he was alive. Hadn't he already taken enough? And not now that he was dead. That was my revenge, if you want to call it that. The silence of choice. The silence of someone who decides that certain battles are not worth the field. The house where I had lived with Robert for 30 years. Not in a hurry, not in a fury. Calmly, got a fair price, took my time. With part of the proceeds, I bought a small condo, all my own. 3rd floor. A view of the rooftops and the harbor in the distance. 2 bedrooms and a kitchen I don't share with anyone. I chose everything. The colors, the furniture, the curtains. For the first time in my adult life, every object in that home is there because I put it there. I went back to work. Not the same work as before. Office administration was a different era. But I had preserved, through all these years, something Robert didn't know I had. A genuine aptitude for numbers. That borderline obsessive precision with figures and columns and accounts that have to balance. I took a refresher course. Got a bookkeeping certification. I started doing the books for small businesses in the neighborhood. A florist, a tailor, a sandwich shop run by a young couple who understand nothing about quarterly taxes. I don't earn a great deal, but I earn, with my own hands, without asking anyone's permission. And I did one thing I had never done in my life. I went to New York by myself. 4 days, a small hotel near the West Village. I walked all day, sat in coffee shops, read, watched people. In the evenings, I ate alone at restaurants, something women of my generation didn't do or weren't supposed to, and ordered exactly what I wanted, without a thought for what anyone else preferred. On the 2nd day, at the Met, I stopped in front of a painting by Mary Cassatt, an American impressionist, one of those painters history sidelined because she was a woman. A woman was reading in a sunlit room, alone, with the absorbed concentration of someone who is not waiting for anyone. I cried in front of that painting, not from sadness, from recognition. That woman had the look of someone who had found the right place, not a place that had been assigned to her, a place she had chosen for herself. I was beginning to look for mine. I came back to Charleston with a bag of things I had bought for no one but myself, and with something sitting in my mind I couldn't quite name yet. I named it a few weeks later, on a February evening on my new balcony, with a cup of tea and the rooftops stretching out in front of me. It's called ownership of yourself. Not freedom, that big word people use too loosely. Not independence, that one's become a bumper sticker. Ownership. In the accounting sense I understand well. What is yours, what you have earned, what no one can take from you without your consent. For 45 years I loaned myself to a story that wasn't mine. I loaned my time, my care, my intelligence, my savings, everything in service of a narrative where he was the protagonist and I was the reliable background, the dependable fixture at the edge of the frame. I don't regret all of it. I have Claire. I have years that looked good, and in many ways were. Happiness isn't entirely false, just because there was also deception. I had to learn that, because the mind wants things simple, and life refuses to be. But I also know this, what was done to me was wrong. Not only the woman in Colombia, not only the money, the daily gesture, repeated for years, of treating me as someone who doesn't understand. That was wrong, and it will take whatever time it takes to work through it. Not one day less, not one day more. If you have a story like mine, not identical, Stories are never identical, but with that same feeling of waking up one day and realizing the life you thought you were living was a script written by someone else. Here is what I tell myself. It is not too late. Not at 70, not at 75, not at whatever age you are. Don't give it to someone who has already taken enough. Don't spend it fighting ghosts. Sometimes they need to be left in the past with their lies and their shined shoes. Take what's left. It seems like a little, but you'll be surprised how much you can do with what remains, once you stop pretending it isn't enough. I am 70 years old. I have a small condo with a view of the rooftops and a sliver of harbor. I have a cat named Scout. I have 3 clients who pay me to keep their books straight. I have a daughter who calls me every Sunday. And for the first time in 45 years, when I look in the mirror in the morning, I see a person who looks like me, whole. It's strange, learning to recognize yourself. It's strange how long it takes, but it's possible.